Hebrews 11. Questions? Jonathan, what is the main point of this section? Be prepared to support.
Encouragement to lay aside sin and run.
Say it again.
Encouragement to lay aside sin and run.
Encouragement to lay aside sin and run. Run with endurance or run from sin or... Okay. Anybody else? Anything? George?
Faith is necessary for preservation. I referred to the last verse of chapter 10.
Ah. Ooh. Oh. Anybody else? Anything else? Yeah, chapter 10, verse 35. Do not throw away your confidence. Verse 36, you have need of endurance. Verse 37 and 38, yet in a little while he who is coming will come and will not delay. But my righteous one shall live by faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who shrink back to destruction, but of those who have faith to the preservation of the soul. You will, and then he goes into this long list for faith, is this long list. And then, in fact, in verse 39, 40, all these, having gained approval through their faith, did not receive what was promised because God had provided something better to them. So apart from us, they would not be made perfect. And then chapter 12, therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us lay aside every encumbrance and sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. So, Jonathan Bosworth had chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. George Bosworth had chapter 10, verse 39. And they both are right. You're both right. Gold point for you. You will notice there is similarity in the pattern in chapter 6, verse 4. In the case of those who have once been enlightened and tasted the heavenly gift and have been made partakers of the Holy Spirit and have tasted the good word of God and the powers of the age to come and then have fallen away, it is impossible to renew them to repentance. So on and so forth. Verse 9, but beloved, we are convinced of better things concerning you. And then he'll go in and talk about Abraham. Look at Abraham, okay? Chapter 10, verse 26, if we go on sinning willfully, there no longer remains a sacrifice for us. And then he'll say in verse 39, but we are not of those who shrink back. And then in chapter 11, a whole bunch, including Abraham. From verse 1, what is faith? Two answers. I know Gary wants to answer this one. I can see it in him.
Well, many different words are used there, but it's either the foundation or the realization of the things hoped for, and it's the conviction or confidence in things not seen.
Okay.
Different words used there to emphasize the point that something is real,
Right.
that is there, even though we cannot see it. We have great confidence that it is there.
Yeah, and I will actually spend most of my time today in chapter 11, verse 1 and 2. From verse 2, what does faith gain? Anyone? Ethan.
Commendation.
Commendation. Did anybody have a problem with this verse, with this question? Nobody has a problem with it. Yes, Marcy did. Here is the New American Standard. This I put right up top. I don't know if you can read it, but these questions are coming from based on the New American Standard version, right? So y'all, that in fairness, by it the men of old gained approval. By it the elders obtained a good report. By it the elders obtained good testimony. By it the people of old received, which is a little more passive than gained, although the word really is more passive than active. The NIV has the idea down here, but the language is kind of totally different from anything we've seen so far. This is what the ancients were commended for. Yeah, so we all got the same idea. Have you ever heard, well done, good and faithful servant? Yeah, this is what this is talking about, right? Now, who here wants to hear that from God? Well done, good and faithful servant. Okay, how is it done? Nice. Faith. Right, faith. So yeah, I mean, we all have faith, right? Who in here believes that God is? Okay, so you're done, right? That's what chapters 11 is all about, right? It's just about, just believe that God is, and it's that simple. It's that easy. that's not what chapter 11 is about, is it?
He is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him.
Which in chapter 11 implies great difficulty. I mean, it doesn't, there's nothing greater than the difficulty implied in here. Right, so in obeying, when God says, hey, this is going to be difficult for you, yeah, I know you believe that I am. Only the fool doesn't believe that, right? I know you believe that, but that's not actually enough. I'm going to put you in a situation where it's going to be tough, but I know that this is best for you. And so when you're going through that situation, I don't know what to do, man. This looks like the easy way. Can he really require this of me? Does that text really mean what that text says very clearly? Well, that's when the time when the faith is tested. Yes.
You said that in your example was just saying what you said. The thing that isn't easy is that this thing that isn't very easy that God wants me to do, but yet it's not impossible or whatever. I mean, I think it's like 1 Peter, 2 Peter, one of those that says that. I know it's in one of the Johns. I don't remember which one, but it says that
Is not burdensome?
It's not burdensome.
1 John 5, yeah. Right. Yeah, just go sacrifice your son. That's it. That's all you got to do. From verse 3, how does faith work in all of us? I'm interested to see your answers because I didn't know how to ask this question. So, anyone? How does faith work in all of us? As much as I say I didn't know how to ask this question, I believe that this is the second main, or third, you could say. There are three main themes in this entire section, and this is one of those main themes. Ethan, what were you going to say?
It helps us understand that the universe was created by the Word of God.
Okay. Yes, helps us understand. Anybody else, anything else?
I have, it helps us understand God's power lies behind all that we see and know.
Yep. What did you say? Helps us understand? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the word understand is the word also translated sometimes perceive or see. And so what you have here is this constant theme of seeing things that are unseen.
That we can't with our senses.
Perfect word.
See that.
By senses and even reasoning off of that, okay? So we're going to get into a technical, splitting hairs, although not in a negative way, discussion in a few minutes, which I find helpful for me. If y'all don't, then we can sing.
I don't mean to distract with the trivial, but just really quickly, is the NIV there even grammatically accurate?
This is what the ancient, you mean,
It ends with 4.
oh no, I just stopped.
Okay.
I just took that part.
Sometimes I don't understand some
This
of these
is what
ways
the
in
is
this
recommended
particular
for.
translation, but if that would be...
It might be, actually, it might have stopped there. I can't get out my New American Standard right now. I'm not going to subject you to that. Yeah.
Okay, move on, quick.
Yeah, okay, very good. Verses 4 through 40. How long has faith been an enabler? I'll answer this one, since Abel and before, right? Okay. Does faith work for Israelites only? No. Give me one example. Abel. Right. I have Abel, etc. Rahab, whoever, and a whole bunch before. Okay. What can we not do without faith? Anyone? Please God. What do people of faith confess? Anyone?
Pilgrims and sojourners.
Pilgrims. If this life is too comfortable for you, that is a problem. Okay? I'm not saying that we can't enjoy a nice leather-seated car with the heated seats in the winter. I'm not saying that. But if no, I like this life. I mean, I really, okay, enjoy it. God gives us things. He's given us life. But if this life, this world is too comfortable, that's a problem, right? What do people of faith seek and desire? Anyone? A heavenly country. Sometimes it'll say city. How does God view himself as people of faith relate to him? I hope you understood what I was asking. Jonathan.
Which one was
This is 6, the second part of 6. Yeah, who wants that? Ooh, right? And how is it done? Again, how is it? Who wants that? We all say, yeah, I want that. I don't want God to be ashamed of me. Okay, how do we get there? First, we got to believe in Him, and that He is a rewarder, and then we have to diligently seek Him. What do people have faith waiting for them? A city. Okay, that Barak, Samson, Jephthah are included in this list of faithful. What does this tell us about God and about ourselves? Anyone? What do you got? Gary.
Yeah, there's some difficult people in this list. God looks at the hearts. God is merciful, and there is hope for us.
Yeah, there's hope for us. That's what it tells us about ourselves. Anybody else? God knows more than I do. He sees more than I do. In preparation for this class, somebody wrote me, please at least mention a class of folks, not this class, although this class may contain some of this class. A class of folks from the chapter. If they had not been mentioned, we would not have substantial enough evidence to determine that God was pleased with their work. Yeah, right. You look at Samson and you say, I didn't expect to see him in the Hall of Faith. Did you? Right. Jephthah? Barak, although, he's like on the... Yeah, I'll go with them. The other. The point is, Samson, who is the one who comes to mind, and the point of mentioning this class of folks is the hope that it provides those of us who struggle and yet can know that, in the end, as long as we are still faithful unto death, God will still keep His promise. This is huge. This is a huge point. Who in here has never made a mistake? Who in here makes mistakes all the time? You don't have to raise your hand, but I will. And so, I said, oh, good. Good. What does verse 38 imply about the next world? Tuffy? Anyone?
I wrote down there are higher standards, but I feel like I was way off.
Good.
I wrote down that it's a better world than this one.
Yeah? Yes? Good?
If,
What?
it's a better world than this one if you remain faithful. He's encouraging people to remain faithful.
Right. Yes, if you don't remain faithful, you're not. Yeah, okay. Right. Basically, the idea is this. There is a value. Worth implies value. So there's a standard. There's a number out there. We'll say 5. Okay? And this world is not up to 5. Because these men are a 5. These men and women, they're a 5. And this world is not worthy of them. So they're less than 5. But the next world is at least 5. Right? And so we're looking forward to that time when... Now, this reminds me of passages like 2 Thessalonians, where God is considering them worthy of the kingdom. So there's a value out there, and we've got to attain to that value, is the point. And that's what, and God is not talking about, look, I saved you, and whammo, you're worthy of the kingdom, although that is somewhat true. He's saying, I saved you. Now, my kingdom is a place of righteousness. Now, between the point of my saving you and your death, you increase your righteousness value, right? You keep on working on yourself, conforming to the image of Christ. That's what we need to. We're saved by grace, and then we work on ourselves and better ourselves by God's power, which is what Hebrews 11 is about. Comments or questions? Okay. Last, why didn't all those faithful receive what was promised? 2 answers. Because God had provided something better for us, so that apart from us, they would not be made perfect. Okay. All right, I'm going to read this chapter, and the reason I'm going to read this chapter is because with any chapter in the Bible, you can be edified simply from reading it. So that's what we're going to do. It's not as though I'm trying to fill the time because we don't have enough material either, right? Okay. But, verse 35, of chapter 10, do not throw away your confidence. Verse 36, you have need of endurance. Verse 38, my righteous one shall live by faith. Verse 39, we are not of those who shrink back. Verse 11, chapter 11, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. For by it the men of old gained approval. For by faith we understand that the worlds were prepared by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things which are visible. By faith Abel offered to God a better sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained the testimony that he was righteous, God testifying about his gifts, and through faith, though he is dead, he still speaks. By faith, Enoch was taken up so that he would not see death. And he was not found because God took him up, for he obtained the witness that before his being taken up, he was pleasing to God. And without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who seek him. By faith, Noah, being warned by God about things not yet seen, in reverence prepared an ark for salvation of his household, by which he condemned the world, and became an heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. Stop here for a second. Two things. This word, verse 2, by it men of old gained approval, that is our word martyr. Okay? You're going to see that over and over. You obtained approval. That is what, in verse 4, he obtained a testimony. Same word, through faith. Verse 5, Enoch obtained the witness. It's the same word. We'll see it again in verse 39. So there's one thing. There's a constant theme. Look, faith is what gets you to have said of you by God, you're worthy. You're a good and faithful servant of mine. Number 2, by faith is always emphatic. Every single time it is emphatic. It is in the first position. By faith! By faith! By faith! Because his point is not necessarily, I want to talk about all these people. His point is, faith is what gets it done. And so every time he hammers home by faith, verse 8, by faith, Abraham, when he was called, obeyed, going out to a place which he was to receive for an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. By faith, he lived as an alien in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, fellow heirs of the same promise. For he was looking for a city which has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. By faith, even Sarah herself received ability to conceive, even beyond the proper time of life, since she considered him faithful who was promised. Therefore, there was born even of one man, and him as good as dead at that, as many descendants as the stars of heaven in number, and innumerable as the sand which is by the seashore. All these died in faith, which is not emphatic, but the point is, without receiving the promises, but having seen them, and having welcomed them from a distance, and having confessed that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. For those who say such things make it clear that they were seeking a country of their own, and indeed if they had been thinking of that country from which they had gone out, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better country, that is a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. And he who received the promises was offering up his only begotten son. It was he to whom it was said, in Isaac your descendants shall be called. He considered that God is able to raise the people even from the dead, from which he also received him back as a type. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau, even regarding the things to come. By faith, Jacob, as he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshipped, leaning on top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the exodus of the sons of Israel and gave orders concerning his bones. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents. Note here, this is actually not talking about Moses yet. This is actually talking about his parents, okay? Because they saw he was a beautiful child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to endure ill treatment with the people of God than enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, considering the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking for a reward. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is unseen. By faith he kept the Passover and sprinkled the sprinkling of the blood, so that he who destroyed the firstborn would not touch them. By faith they, here's a transition from Moses to Israel, passed through the Red Sea as though they were passing through the dry land. And the Egyptians, when they attempted it, were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith, Rahab, the harlot, did not perish along with those who were disobedient after she had welcomed the spies in peace. And what more shall I say? For time will fail me, If I tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, and Samuel, and the prophets, who by faith conquered kingdoms, performed acts of righteousness, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, from weaknesses were made strong, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight, women received back their dead by the resurrection, and others were tortured, not accepting their release so that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others experienced mockings and scourgings, yes, also chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were tempted, they were put to death by the sword. They went about in sheepskin, in goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, ill-treated, men of whom the world is not worthy, wandering in deserts and mountains and caves and holes in the ground. All these, having gained approval, there's our word again, through their faith, did not receive what was promised, because God had provided something better for us, so that apart from us they would not be made perfect. Here's the so what. Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin that would so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Wow. Over and over and over. Faith, 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 faith. This is what does it. Here, we sometimes have referred to this, I have, maybe you've read it, the Hall of Faith. It's not in there, but it's a great idea. Right? You go down this hall and you see this faithful person, and this faithful person, and this faithful person. And his point is, look, by faith, you want to be in that hall, you got to get there by faith. Now, I wonder if I were alive back then, or if someday there's a book written about the history of New Testament times and people who live by faith. What do I wonder? If my name will be in there. I will note this. For a Jew who left his tradition was of Adam and Eve, through Abraham, through David, all the way on down. The Jew who leaves the Jewish religion might think to himself or herself, all of my history is in the past, when in reality, it's not at all. In fact, if they stay with their Jewish religion, then their history means nothing to them. Okay.
I think that's why that he spends so much time here talking about these. The promise was not fulfilled to them.
Right.
They were looking forward to our times.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's where they saw that promise fulfilled.
Right.
And that's because it would be very difficult, because you're thinking, well, they were faithful. What were they faithful to? I'm not faithful to the same thing.
Right.
If they define that thing as the Mosaic Law,
Right.
they read this and they see themselves walking away from the Mosaic Law.
Right.
In reality, they are,
Yes.
because God wanted them to.
They're faithful to that promise. Well
Right.
put.
Right. I mean, Abraham was not faithful to the Mosaic Law.
No, right, exactly. Yeah. Hold on. Okay, about faith. Faith in the New Testament. The point of this chart is you see two books that stand up there, the Twin Towers. What are they? Romans and Hebrews. In Romans, this is different. This scale is different from these scales, but this scale is these two are the same. Okay. So here's Romans chapter. What's that? 3. You got I think it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. So this is 10. But over here in this one chapter alone, there are 24 times this word faith is used. I mean, it just goes off the charts, figuratively. And that doesn't include some other words in this chapter, like by this, which is referring to faith, okay, and another form of the word faith. So in all, in this chapter alone, there are 28 times faith is discussed. So this chapter is about faith. Now, 20 of those times, it is by faith. By faith. By faith, by faith. That's what he's saying over and over and over again. It is by faith. Now, chapter 11, between chapter 10 and 12. Chapter 10 is, you got to keep on keeping on. The last of it is, for those who have faith to the preserving of the soul. We're of that group. And then he lists a whole bunch of people of that group. But verse 38 says, my righteous one shall live by faith. All in this chapter, I'm going to suggest there are three major themes. We've talked about them. Hebrews 11 answers why people behave the way they behave. Why do you do what you do? Let me illustrate it this way. There's cause and effect. You are in the street and see a car coming. So you...
Get out of the way.
Oh, I wrote get out of the street. Right. Here comes the car. Get out of the way. Now, why did you move rapidly? I saw a car coming. You don't even have to say anything else. All right, here's one for the Bosworths. You are window shopping and see ice cream. You buy it. I mean, he said, I wasn't even done and he's already answering the question. Right? You buy it. Okay, here's the cause, there's the effect. Hebrews does something, I'm using this chart. Let's go backwards. You feel sorrow, repent, confess, are baptized, and live godly lives, doing righteous deeds, including throwing off all sin, throwing off every encumbrance that so easily entangles, and doing what's right. That's what you do. What's the cause? Faith. By faith. By faith. By faith. By faith, they did everything here. By faith, they did everything here. We'll get specific about what they were doing. Now I'm tying it, believe it or not, into verse 1, okay? By faith. Now, I want us to see something. You have faith. So faith, all right. Faith causes you to do all these things over here. Now, I want to ask you a question that I hope is clear, and I hope you give me the right answer the first time. When you did a righteous deed this morning, would you accurately say, I decided to do the righteous deed? I did the righteous deed. I would. I decided to live a godly life. I decided. Why did you do this godly thing? Well, I thought about it and I decided to, and then I did it. Right? Why were you baptized? I thought about it and I was baptized, right? I confessed. I repented. I made myself feel sorrow. That one's a little different. Now, you can work yourself up into feeling sorry, right? But how do you do it? You think about something, and you think about it, and what you're thinking about causes you to feel sorrow. Okay? Faith is what causes you to feel sorrow. Now, as much as we wouldn't say, I made myself feel sorry, we normally wouldn't talk that way. This chapter is saying the same thing about the rest of these. Faith is what caused you to repent. I know you thought about it. I know you had a lot to do with that. But I'm using feel sorrow. Faith caused you to feel sorrow. And you kind of can remove yourself from that, if you will. I heard it, and wham, I felt sorry. I believed it. I heard it. I believed it, and wham, I felt sorry. I heard it. I believed it, and wham, I repented. I heard it. I believed it, and wham, I confessed. And the idea is, Hebrews chapter 11 is talking about people who have that kind of faith. They hear it, and wham, it's done. It's like they removed themselves from it. When in reality, what they had done is they brought the faith. They heard it, they brought this faith, which had gotten to that level where if God says it, wham, it's like they've removed themselves from it, okay? So this is what Hebrews 11 is talking about. Now, this is going to get a little, if you will, technical, okay? Faith enabled them to see. To see. We talk about having, I saw it with my mind's eye. That's what this is talking about, okay? Do you actually see it? I won't go through all of these, but in verse 27, by faith, Moses left Egypt, not fearing the wrath of King, for he endured, what? As seeing him who is unseen. If you follow this chapter, almost everything, I didn't actually do this, but I suspect maybe everything, but there are many things that they are seeing that are unseeable. with, as Gary used, your five senses. You cannot see this with your five senses. When the car is coming, I see it. And I say, I'll get out of the way now. I buy the ice cream because I see it. Why did you go to church today? Because I see the promise. The thing, not the promise itself. You can read the promise here. I see the thing that has been promised to me. The city that God talks about. I see that city. And as long as I'm looking at that city, I'm going to keep going to that city. And God says, go to church. Well, when I go to church, I'm going to church simply because I see the city and I'm on the way to it. Okay. There are several. Look in verse 13 again. All these died in faith without receiving the promises, but having seen them and welcomed them. Not literally, but in their mind's eye. But it says, by faith. Every single time. It is the faith that enabled them to see something which is literally unseeable. Then, because they saw it, they acted. I see the city. I'm going to the city. However I got to get to the city, that's the way I'm going. Their faith enabled them to act. This is the whole chapter, right? I'm not going to read the whole chapter again. And then their faith enabled them to gain God's approval because of the act. I see the city. I walk toward the city. I'm going to go to the city. And God says, anybody who comes to the city by faith, I'm going to say that he is approved. So again, this word is used over and over. Stop me if I'm not being clear. This prompts in me an idea that faith is as, it may even be, I don't want to be that technical, somebody with language who would be smarter than I am. Faith is as a distinct metaphysical concept, okay? Let me illustrate it this way. Y'all who are older will know this. The power of love is a curious thing. Makes one man, somebody?
Stick.
No.
No, I goofed it up.
Nobody. But
I remember the song.
you
It's been
guys
a-
don't know
It's
this?
been a long time, Lee.
Man!
A long time.
It makes one man
Weep.
weep
Weep. Oh.
and another man
Strong.
sing.
I thought it was one weak, one was strong.
Well, I heard it while I was preparing this, and I said, that's perfect, so I put it in there. The power of love is a curious thing. No boogies now. Makes one man weep, makes another man sing. But notice, love has power. It makes somebody weep. It makes... Nobody in here would deny this either. Yeah, I'm bawling my eyes out because of this thing, love, which is a beyond physical concept. Love is what... Now, I know that love is based on some things that we have evidence. We call it... Love is based on... Should be, right? You know, you married your wife, you married your husband because you love them. You love them because of evidence. But this is what we're getting at. There's the evidence, and then there's this thing out there. And what God does when he gives you his word and his evidence is he's trying to create this thing out there, this metaphysical thing. Now, this is from Huey Lewis and the Good News. But really, it's Huey. I know, that was a joke, right? I'm not suggesting we sing this as but you could. The power of love is a curious thing. Makes one man... This is exactly... I don't think he knew it, but this is what we're talking about. You can interchange love with faith, right? The power of faith is a curious thing. It makes one man march around a city 7 times blowing horns. That's nuts. That's what... Why did you do that? Because you saw some? Because your 5 senses and then you reasoned from them? Not at all. Now, you had evidence for this faith, but it's got to do with... Okay, so this is what Hebrews is talking about. Faith is the assurance, this word. Okay, Gary said there's a lot of words out there, and he's right. But there's one word in the original. It is literally the understanding. And that's not like I understand you. It is I'm standing underneath of you. I'm
Pillar of truth or something.
Yeah, but don't, yes. That would be, picture that if you'd like.
Okay.
A pillar. But that even might throw you off a little bit. Okay. Understand, here faith is not the understanding of hope itself. Why do I have hope? Because I have faith. That is true. I have hope because I have faith. Amen. But that's actually not the words here. The words are, faith is the assurance of things that are hoped for. So the faith isn't understanding, whatever that word means, it's not understanding our hope, not here. It is actually, faith is the understanding of things hoped for, the things hope hopes for. Okay? Faith is not understanding the hope, it's understanding whatever that means, the things hope hopes for. Okay? All right. Now, I know things is added in your New American Standard, but it is necessarily added. Okay? If you looked at in the original, you'd see it's... Okay. So, namely, consider the context. I see with my mind's eye because of my faith. I see it. It's not, if you will, not literally there. It's not really there, but I still see it. I see it. That's why I act the way I do. You might think I'm crazy. Virtual reality. Some people, crazies, live as though virtual reality, the world they've created, is actually true. Well, guess who does that? We do that. God has created a virtual reality, and we live as though it's true. Okay? The seeing with my mind's eye, making real now what we have actually only heard about and yet have yet to experience. I've only heard about it, but I act. And if you ask me, I know it's real. The word substance, that's the King James Version, translates it substance. The substance of things hoped for. This word is used in Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3. The Son, with reference to the Father, is the radiance of His glory, the exact representation of His nature. That's what we're talking about here. Faith is the nature or the manifestation or the substance of the things hoped for. The thing hoped for is not literal, but it has substance. How does it have substance? Well, that's how faith comes in. Okay, faith is interacting as substance. There's a record of a Christian in the old days, an ancient Christian, who was brought before the judge. And the judge said to him, or he said, look, no matter what you do, I'm not going to change because I believe that if I'm faithful to God, God will be faithful to me. He was asked, do you really think, asked the judge, that the like of you will go to God and His glory? And the man replied, I do not think, I know. Verse oh boy, my mind's drawn a blank. Oh yeah, verse 34 of chapter 10. Verse 32, remember the former days. After being enlightened, you endured great conflicts. Verse 34, you showed sympathy to the prisoners by accepting joyfully the seizure of your property, listen, knowing that you have a better one for yourselves. It's not, I don't just believe this, although, yes, that's what it is, but he uses the language of extreme, absolute confidence, the kind of confidence that you would have if you had literally seen it. Well, how can you have that kind of confidence? Because I see it with my mind's eye. That's what faith is doing. Farrar writes, the essence which gives reality to a thing, a subjective reality. It's not literally true, but because of God's Word, it has reality. By means of it, that is faith, he is able to enjoy as present realities what without faith would be to him, in effect, as a mere non-entity. If I didn't believe it, it would be as though it didn't exist. Now, the fact that I don't believe it has nothing to do with its reality. But when I believe it, it's real to me. Faith is metaphysically their substance as substantiating them to us, things, whether past, present, or future, as are not known by experience and cannot be logically demonstrated. You can't logically demonstrate heaven, but God says there is heaven. Faith is itself a demonstration, serving the purpose of argument to induce conviction. Why did you do that? Faith. Well, that's an argument. I did it because of my faith, right? Now, faith is based on evidence, but that's not what he's talking about right here. He said, look, why did you do that? Because I have faith. Why did you have faith? Because I had evidence. But right now we're only talking about this metaphysical thing, faith. Faith in a general sense is and ever has been, as the chapter goes on to show, the very root and inspiring principle of all true religion. And it be observed that, if well-grounded, it is not irrational. It would rather be irrational to disregard it or to suppose it is opposed to reason. People say, do what you love. They are saying, if you don't do what you love, you're being unreasonable. That would be irrational not to do what you love. Well, taking that concept, do what you have faith in. Because it would be irrational not to do what you have faith in. Even in ordinary affairs of life, and in science too, men act and must act to a great extent on faith. It is essential for success, and certainly for all great achievements. When you married your spouse, did you know that 10 years down the road everything would be wonderful? No. No. Do only Christians get married? No, everybody gets married based on what? The evidence is, up to this point, they have been reasonable. The rest of it, and they will continue to be reasonable, is all a statement of faith. We do this all the time, everybody does it, right? Faith is the testimony and authority of others, faith in the testimony and authority of others whom we can trust. Faith in the views and principles not yet verified by our own experience. Faith in the expected outcome of right proceeding. Faith with respect to 1,000 things which we take on trust, and so make ventures on the ground, not of positive proof, but of more or less assured conviction. Religious faith is the same principle, though exercised in a higher sphere. Faith is based on evidence, no doubt. We're not talking about that, actually. We're just talking about faith. Let's flip that around. Faith is begotten by evidence. Let's flip that around. Evidence begets faith, which means faith is not evidence. They're two different things. Evidence is not faith. Evidence leads to faith or prompts faith, which takes on, if you will, a life of its own. Faith becomes, faith is. Compare love. This is what I meant by distinct metaphysical reality. Here's an illustration. You blow up a bubble, kids love to do it. You blow it up, you stick the thing in there, and it's got the juice, and you blow in your carbon dioxide, monoxide, whatever it is you got coming out, puff, 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 and then what happens? It goes until somebody comes along and pops it, right? Very much like could be faith, okay? Some of you who are race car enthusiasts, I'm sure Mercy is, using a separate starter to start the car's engine, and then what do? The starter goes away. It got the engine going. Or, probably a better, building a fire using oxygen and heated fuel, and heat and fuel, right? Heated fuel, until the chemical reaction occurs. And that chemical reaction is not wood. It's not oxygen. It's right? So, and you puff on it, you blow on it, and then what happens? Poof. It takes on a life of its own. Now, Hebrews chapter 4. Why did the word not profit them? Because, Hebrews chapter 4, verse 2, it was not united by faith. The word was there. God was blowing. Poof, poof, woof, woof. God was blowing on the fire. He's trying to get the fire going. He's blowing. Here's the word. Here's the word. He's blowing. And you know what? The faith isn't coming. The faith isn't coming. Because we can control this metaphysical reality that we're talking about. But suddenly, there are some who you hear the word and it's united by faith. And God's starter has done its job. Whoop. Yeah, and then, okay, and this is the point. Faith itself becomes a force. Why did all those people do what they did in Hebrews chapter 11? Because they had the evidence which created faith. And they built this faith, and they built this faith, and they built this faith, just like we build love, and we build love when we build love. And finally we say, I love this one so much, I'm going to marry her. Well, I build this, I have so much faith, I'm going to trust whatever he says, it doesn't matter what it is, because I see what he's saying. This is what Hebrews chapter 11 is all about. Now, I want that. I want that. Who wants that? The kind of faith that just, I actually imagine this is actually more like what it is in heaven. The kind of faith that wills to do what is right all the time. It's not a question. It causes me, I can't control it. It is controlling me. Comments or questions on that before we get into how we can nurture this faith? Is anything I said unclear? Probably much that I said is unclear. You get the general idea, I hope, in everything that I've said. You get this idea of this thing that is created and then it controls you. George.
I have two comments. The first one is that we see glimpses of some of these principles in other verses. James, in Show Me Your Faith Without Works, such a perfect summary of what's going on here. Also, it is easier for a rich man. I said that wrong. But the whole the camel going through the eye of the needle thing, and I think a lot of that is probably because the wealthy / us find ourselves in few positions where we need to exercise it.
Yeah.
And as the kind of the foundation of all righteous behavior, I certainly know I've gone to great lengths to avoid discomfort that could have otherwise been an opportunity to exercise faith.
Go ahead.
Well, it's just when I face anything in my life, if I can buy it to solve my discomfort, or if I can change it, or whatever. And I'm not saying this is always
No, it's not always bad.
But may as well go ahead and do that. In other words, many opportunities that I know would have presented themselves, I have managed to avoid because I found something else to be more important.
Yeah. So out of this entire chapter, who in here received a promise to go to pack up your bags and move somewhere besides Rhonda, where she wouldn't know where you're going to end up? Nobody in here received that from it. Nobody in here pretty much received everything in here, essentially anything in here, except for there are a couple. So I can't exercise faith in traveling across the Euphrates and going over to the promised land. That's not my call. But there are two that I do see. There might be others. I haven't been called to shut the mouths of lions by faith. I have not been called to do that. But performed acts of righteousness. And that's verse 33, verse 34, from weakness were made strong. And that's what you're talking about. So you said we haven't had much opportunity to exercise our faith or something. I understand what you're saying. But in reality, and you also included this, there is always the opportunity to do righteousness, and that's our struggle. No matter how rich or how poor we are, that is our struggle. And I fail. Why do I fail? Because I don't have what they had. What did they have? They had this faith that consumed them and dictated to them how they would act. They did not always do what's right. Thus I have hope. But that's the idea. So my takeaway from this entire chapter is in verse 33 and 34. Number one, verse 33, I want to perform an act of righteousness because that's what I've been called to. And man, am I ever weak. Well, they are made strong by their faith, right? Yeah, so, good, yeah, you more.
Just one other thing. I know that I have made mistakes. And to see somebody exercise stronger faith isn't always necessarily a situation where they are no longer sinning. In other words, it's not necessarily repentance happening here. But people might be doing the right thing and decide to try to do the right thing harder or more or whatever and grow in that way. And I can think of times where I have seen that and had a lot of doubt that that person's enthusiasm was legitimate because it happened very quickly. And now it's been 20 minutes, but you're mentioning that, look, faith makes these things happen. A person sees it and they have faith and they go and do it. The change is supposed to be immediate, but it isn't always, and I should be careful not to do that.
Yep. In fact, Noah, the grammar with Noah is actually, verse 7, by faith, Noah, being warned. Now, our version will say, in reverence. The grammar is actually already having obtained reverence. So he's already reverent. He is warned, he prepares. So I'm reverent to God. Whatever he says, I'll jump. God said to him, jump and build the ark, and wham, the idea is immediately he got up and jumped and built the ark. Why? Because he already had the faith that whatever God says, I'm going to do. Let's go a little bit long, guys, because we can then come back and look at Hebrews 11 next week. Maybe somebody else has something else to say on what we've talked about. How can we nurture and increase our faith? We talk about this all the time. I think we do.
It's
First of all,
what gives us faith. God's word.
faith comes by
Hearing.
hearing. Get down, read that book, read that book, read that book.
Because
And then just go and play your video games and eat ice cream. What was the other one? And walk in the street? No.
because our faith is built on rock solid evidence.
Right.
It's not built on I feel this way or
Yeah.
I think this way. It's built on something that is absolutely
Right.
certain.
So I just went out to Rhode Island and I presented 6 lessons. 4 of them were heavy on quotes, secular quotes. And each time, maybe not every time, but at least 2 or 3 times, I said to them, I said, look, a study of diet, this is good what we're doing right now for a supplement. But a steady diet of what we're doing right now tonight, out there is what I'm saying, is unhealthy. Because these are the words that build up faith. You know, this is evidence for having faith. That's good, talk about it. But these are really the words for having faith. Obey God's commands, pray, Lord, increase our faith. A couple quotes, and then I'll be done. Maybe you have something. When God speaks, just this quote. His word is to the believer an end of all controversy. It is to the Christian what a demonstration is to the mathematician. It gives confidence to whatever is promised, and it begets conviction with respect to the truth of whatever is affirmed. The Christian receives this testimony, believes it, and acts in reference to it with all confidence. Why so? Simply because God says so. No reasoning, no philosophy, and no demonstration of any kind can ever go beyond this. Anybody else? Anything from what we've talked about faith as this reality that we need to grow until the point that it consumes us and makes our decisions for us? Anybody else? Anything else about what we talked about? George?
One last briefly, won't be here next week. As much as the world tries to escape it, whatever alternatives they come up with also require an extraordinary amount of faith.
Yeah.
Now, it's obviously misplaced and obviously won't get them what they're hoping for. However, you know, as much as they say, see, you're having to count on something, when it all whittles down, you're actually having to count on something that you cannot identify physically.
Right.
Big Bang isn't all that different. I mean, it is, but...
Yeah. But, go ahead.
But for the Jew who did not accept Christ, he had faith in the scriptures. I mean, he was, you know, he didn't adhere to Christ. He didn't adhere to the full plan.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
He was not united by faith.
Kind of fell short.
Yeah. He had a half faith. Yeah, he didn't have a sincere faith.
And it's the same, you know, that's why I come back. It's the same thing that happened to us because, you know, within Christendom, they kind of go in all kinds of
Yeah.
different directions. And they try to prove it from the same book. We try to prove that.
Right.
So, adhere to this standard very
Right.
closely.
Last week, Jerry said, does anybody remember what he said about the heart's desire? It is the heart's desire. I heard it, I said, this fits. He said, the soul of prayer is the heart's desire. The soul of prayer is the heart's desire. Now, somebody who's smarter than I am could tell me what that expression, what the author of that expression is doing there, using that non-literal language. Prayer doesn't have a soul. And guess what? Things hoped for don't have substance, not actually. Whatever. So we're doing. My point is, this kind of language is we still use it nowadays. The soul of prayer is the heart's desire. We say that. I said that. I said, you know, that's great. I don't know what it means, but it's great, right? Because I get the idea. The substance of faith, or faith is the substance. The substance of the things hoped for is faith, right? Okay. Thank you for your work. We'll break till let's break till 10 after.